I'd like to welcome Bertina Schulze Mittendorff. And with her will be Scott Maple. Okay, thank you for being patient and waiting. It only took a few minutes. Again, I'd like to introduce Bertina Schulze Mittendorff, Scott Maple. Bertina's father, responsible for the creation of Maria, who drove it with Fritz Lang's Metropolis. Scott will reveal his role in this, and I'm pretty much going to turn it over to them. And here they are.
Thank you. Yeah. It's heavy. First, I want to thank you that I can be here and talk to you. It is a very great honor for me. Thank you very much. And I want to, at first, thank my friend Brian who made this possible, together with Kevin.
Thank you.
And I want to turn to another person with whom I never would have been here. This is Joanna.
Thanks, Joanna.
Because she runs a Facebook group site about the German expressionistic film, and she took me in. So I came in this scene, and in the following I'm here.
Good.
Thank you. I've heard that many people wonder how I can be the daughter of Walter Schulze Mittendorff, because he was born in 1893, and it is no secret, I am the daughter of his second wife, and I was born when he was 55 years old. So I had a father that could have been my grandfather, an old father. On the other side, I heard people asking why it was possible that in Germany the expressionistic film came up so overwhelming, so great in its kind of making, and this has reasons of history. As I had an old father of 55 years, I had a father who had his own history. And this made me interested in history. And so all the people who worked in the expressionistic film were roughly born in the end of the 19th century, you can say. Fritz Lang was born in 1890, my father in 93, and quite a few people were born around this time. And this was a time which was, one can say, it was a changing point in history. The industrial revolution was almost finished, and there were many great scientific revolutions at that time. Many famous scientists came from that time. I do not think that we have so many really famous scientists at present. And on the other hand, although the consciousness was very broadened, on the other hand, you find a very strong nationalism. The countries was ruled by emperors or queens or kings, except France. And there was a very strong ego of nationalism. And this clashed with this broaden of consciousness. And in this clashing, the First World War happened. The nation fought against each other. Although all the royal families were relatives among them, they fought a war which never had happened in this kind before, because it was a war that for the first time grounded in machines. You had, for the first time, you fought with machine guns, you fought with poison, chemical gas, poison gas, and for the first time at the end of the war you fought with airplanes, and so any minute 4 soldiers died. Every minute 4 soldiers died. So it was horrible, and Germany, together with Austria, lost the war, and it is so incredible why the country who lost the war came about so strong with the expressionistic film. I think this is because the dark, which was suppressed, had to come out. All the creatures had to come out. And my father was 21 when the First World War started, and was 22 when he went to war. Every man had to go to war. And he never was injured. There was, I don't know, there was a kind of aura. Aura, you know the word? Aura, yeah, aura around him, kind of untouchable. He didn't, although many men got injured, he didn't get injured. And maybe you know Fritz Lang, in his older times, monocle. And this came from an injury of the First World War, what he had in the eye. So he had always afterwards problems with one of his eyes. And after the war, my father then, by the time of 20, on this picture you see him at the age of 27. There he's 27. This is so. Thank you. This 1920, he was 27. At that time, he studied at the first at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts, and later on the emperor was driven out. It was the Academy of the State of Germany. And in this time of incredible creativity, because the war was so awful, people yearned for something else than war. And this is art and creativity. And he had a friend who worked for the film already for Fritz Lang. He's called Robert Held, together with Walter Röhrig. They both were film architects, and they brought my father together with Fritz Lang, and they immediately understand each other very well, because everybody was very, how can you say, ambitious to do art. And so he got his first order to work as a sculptor for Fritz Lang in the film Destiny. I do not know if you heard about it.
Yeah.
He did the sculptural things there. And then he worked again. I think it was the second film he did. It was Metropolis. So he knew Fritz Lang already, and Fritz Lang gave him the order to create a machine man, because machines were in the conscious, it was, I think, the birth of machines in the human psyche, because before machines, there were always machines, but not in this extent. So he had this order of the machine man, and he really thought he didn't like it. He didn't like this order because it was so difficult for him to find a way to manage this. It should have been a wearable costume. You can do a statue as a machine man, it's no problem to sculpture a statue. But to do it in a way that a very quite tender actress is wearing it, it was, for him, he said, he didn't like it so much, but he did it. He did it then. Yeah. So he thought, how can I do it? How can I do it? How can I accomplish this? And by chance he found an architect study who had plastic wood for their purpose. And they didn't need this plastic wood, so they gave it to my father. And he said, this is a material of which I can do the machine bench, because it is light. It is light and it is walkable. And so this was his first concern. The design was not his concern so much, because he said, we have the technical form in art, it exists, and he just did it. He even did a sketch for it. He just did it out of the moment. When he found the way how to do it, he did it right away on the forms. This also makes it so unique. There is no former trying. Yeah, really, yeah, that's it. And not only the machine man he did all the statues in Metropolis. And what is, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of my father as well, his most, how can one say it, most heartfelt pieces are Death and Seven Deadly Sins. This, the machine man, for him was, I do not think, I cannot really explain. It was something strange he did. And I think it stood all the time, something strange. But Death and Seven Deadly Sins, this was really where his heart was. And he did it in heads and in little statues, about 30 centimeters, as a model for the actors.
It's called a maquette.
Maquette.
Yes.
Aha, okay. In order how the actors should be seen in the film. And Metropolis is so. I think it is an outstanding film in the expressionistic era of film, because it casts it is a forecast which people didn't understand at that time. They found the film crazy. They could not understand it. But in our time, if we look back, we can much more understand what Metropolis is about. It is a forecast to a time which I think just started and is not finished yet. the robots are just going to come. At one day they will be as popular as smartphones, but it is not. Didn't have reached that time yet, and so many other things in Metropolis. The whole social thing with the lords and the workers and the clash of the classes. We didn't have overcome this yet, although it looks different today. But the money thing in there, that there was, as they say it, every turn of the wheel will bring more gold, and he put it in not in as money. He put the value as gold. And we find this today as well, still. And what I find so interesting is Death and the Seven Deadly Sins, because when we think of horror, or when we think of beasts, or when we think of horrible creatures, and this is a convent, I think, where it is about horror film and horror creatures. They all based on the seven deadly sins. Without them, no beast is there, no demon is there, no horror is there. This is the fundament of any horror, and it is so ungrabbable. We can. I cannot imagine. Do you know any horror film you can?
I happen to be in the wrong place, being not much of a horror fan. So.
But you may have horror films in mind. These are not existent. They are made up. But the deadly sins are not made up. So, and the tricky on them, you cannot see them. You cannot see them because they are dwelling below your blanket. And this makes them so special. And what I found in the combination of Machine Men and Seven Deadly Sins is that if you look closely, they are exactly the opposite, the upside downs. You have the Machine Men with a strong experience, with a strong expression, very strong expression, and if you, I think we have no face of the Machine Men. If you see in the face, you can sense some cold consciousness behind them. Something is dwelling inside, while the costume is made of cold metal, machinery-like. But inside there is life. Very opposite to the Seven Deadly Sins. They appear as human, they must appear as human because they stuck to the human. You cannot speak about the sins without speaking of persons. So they appear as persons, but inside they are hollow. There's nothing there. And therefore, the Machine Men and Seven Deadly Sins are building a counterpart, so to say. And this is, I think, for me, this is a core secret of the film, because it touches people so deeply. It is not only a scenery that is beautifully done. there is very, very much, I can call it mystic, or it is mystic because it uses Christian mystic. We know the Tower of Babel and all these the legends they use in this film. And okay, this is Metropolis. It was how can man say, a changing point. It began 25, and the work ended in 27, where it was shown in the cinema, and it is just the middle of the time of the so-called Weimar Republic, which is the 19 years between war and dictatorship. Just in the middle. It was on the peak. To which side will the coin fall? Will it really fall to freedom, what art is? Art cannot be done without freedom, or will it fall to dictatorship? And it fall to dictatorship. This was a time because one movie title I find very, very true. This is the one, The Empire Strikes Back. Because if there is freedom, there are people who are scared of freedom, and those people will strike back. And this is what happened in Germany, and I think George Lucas had some ideas from this German time. So then my father did Spies. He did the Nibelungen before Metropolis. The Nibelungen, I do not know if you heard about it. It's a very special German topic. It's a German saga, so to say, as the Ilias by Homer, or what do you have? I do not know if you have sagas in America. You know.
There's many sagas, I'm sure, stories.
You know in America many sagas.
Sure.
Okay.
You're putting me on point here, though, and I don't have any to name.
Well, they're like our westerns.
Yes, exactly.
Western. Yeah.
Westerns.
Yeah.
Genre.
Yeah. Okay. And the last movie he did was the Testament of Dr. Mabuse. This picture here, which my friend Brian did, these t-shirts, this picture shows him when he is creating the mask of Dr. Mabuse. Okay, and in 33, Hitler came up, you know, and at that time, freedom was fought. No freedom allowed anymore. None. So the art could not do what they wanted anymore, and this included the film as well. And many artists fled to America or to England. And my father was about to think if he should, but he didn't. Private reasons. I think I made a website about my father, and there you can read all these things. It's you find it very easily under the name Schulze Mittendorff in the internet. He worked as a sculptor, and he always had connection with the film. He in between, even in the time of Hitler, he worked for films as well. And when it came to the Second World War, he didn't want to. He was in the First World War, and he became a lieutenant in the First World War. So he was registered as a reservant.
In reserve.
In reserve. So there was always a danger that they called him to go to war. And he thought, what can I do not to go to war? He would never have fought for Hitler. And then he came to the idea that as he worked for the film for so many times, he went to a film industry and was taken under contract, so that he only worked for the film and did not work as a sculptor anymore. He was engaged as a customer for the movie. And this was very tricky because the Nazis were very keen on films, because they found film as the best way to do propaganda. So all people who worked with the film were protected not to go to war. And this was his chance. He took it as a chance not to go to war. But this had in consequence that he never got back to be a sculptor. He stood as a costumer until he retired. I think in 68 he retired. So this is in the
Beautiful synopsis of a career of a great man who has put imagery into our minds that will be there forever and really has set a standard. And I think it's a huge honor. I don't know if everybody can appreciate the gravity of having Bertina Schulze Mittendorff in your presence. I mean, it's pretty amazing. We're so honored to have you here. I know there were so many questions where we were set up as well downstairs with our replica of the robot, and there's been a lot of questions that I know you wanted to pose to Bertina or myself about things that you may have. This is an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, if you have questions for the film, or maybe some comments, you're very welcome.
Anyone? Someone back there.
Yeah, please.
Are there any books on your father's work?
Books, no. So the person of my father was, he was a very decent person. He made no fuss about himself. He did his work. He was very respected, but and he was always a very busy man. He had always many work. So in Germany it is different. It is a bit. I sometimes a bit feel in Germany like the profit doesn't count in its own country. You have a kind of absence of interest. Very different from here. Very different.
In fact, it seems to get interesting, but it becomes interesting content to Germany when it's of interest abroad first. It has to happen here before it happens there. They won't take their own content.
Germany is a country, especially since the end of the Second World War, where the Americans brought the freedom. And I was brought up in Berlin. This means I always listened to American Forces Network because they had the best music. And the Germans are people who take over. What comes from America, they take over. They are the first in Europe who have what comes from America. So I think to coming here is the right way to go back to Germany. It is like going going the wrong direction with the bus to go then in the right direction.
Germany is going to become interested in Walter Schulze Mittendorff's work again after this event. They'll be hoping to see things on YouTube about it, which will help Bertina back at home.
Yeah, this is the problem. The only thing Germany does not take over are things like Facebook and all these new. They are. I sometimes have the expression they are Facebook phobic. It is a good ton. Does one say it? A good ton? Not to be on Facebook. And everybody who's on Facebook is, one can have it. This is a really backdrawn attitude. My writing, yeah. What I told you about Metropolis, I do not know if it would have occurred to me when I wouldn't have been the daughter of my father. I must say this honestly. I do not know whether I would have found so much interest in it. But as I am, I found the interest, and I am at present writing a book about Metropolis. But as I'm writing it, so many ideas came. And I could think of other books to come, but I do not know whether my lifetime is long enough to do all these things. No idea. This is what I like, what I really love most. I got to the point that I love writing the most I do. When I'm right, I'm the most satisfied person.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
I see a hand way in the back, yes.
Well, I need to comment. I brought it up to your friend there before, but about Metropolis itself. First of all, that's the only Lang film I've ever seen in its entirety. And that the unusual thing about it is that the bad guys actually won in the end.
Yeah, I roughly understand it. You mean bad guys won in Metropolis?
Yeah, because the purpose of going to the trouble of constructing the robot was to essentially quell worker resistance.
Yeah, that's
And
right. Yeah.
In other words, the
Yeah,
workers.
this is what I see is how predictedly the Metropolis is. They saw this coming.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying in general terms, no matter what the workers did, they wound up getting what we call in this country the shaft. No matter what they tried.
Yeah, yeah. But they are still. But it looks different. It looks different.
You had a question?
I just had a question about another film, Princess of Atlantis and the Giant Sculpt of Brigitte Helm. Do you know if your father did that sculpt?
No.
Okay.
Anyone else? Well, Scott.
I was going to say Brigitte Helm was her own free property. She wasn't tied to, she any likeness of hers was maintained by her. Actually, from my understanding, Schulze Mittendorff did not do any sculptures of Brigitte Helm at all. Only aspects. No.
I think it's a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Bertina, do you still live in West Berlin?
No, I live in Hamburg.
No.
I live in Hamburg. But I am.
Thank you for coming across the pond.
It's my second time.
Welcome.
But I'm quite often in Berlin. You may all know Marlene Dietrich.
Yes.
And she sang a song, Ich habe noch einen Koffer in Berlin. That means I have still a suitcase in Berlin. And I can find people who lived in Berlin and live somewhere else, and they all think I'm rooted in Berlin. There is something. It's a very true song for Berliners. I will always have a copper in Berlin.
Thank God the wall's down.
Do you know what teared the, in my opinion, what teared the walls down? This was a movie by Billy Wilder. It called 1, 2, 3. Did you ever see this? And in 84, this film, it was made in 61. Nobody saw this film because it was a time when the wall was built, and they wouldn't see anything about it. And in 84, the film came up in the cinemas, and it was really a hype. People went there evening for evening to see the same film and went out laughing. And this laughing shake the wall down. I'm very certain.
Music for pop.
No, that was much earlier. It was in the beginning of the 60s, much earlier.
So Scott, you would like to talk about what your company is involved
Sure,
with?
we were blessed enough. We're actually not from Berlin. My accent is legitimately Canadian. I'm not putting anything on here. I was so lucky that about 8 years ago, Bertina found us for reproduction work that we do. We do film work and a lot of reproductions and prototypes for toy companies. And she was directed to us to put together a reproduction as accurate as we could of the Metropolis robot, something that to date really hasn't been accomplished in any official capacity. So at that point, we embarked on a mission and partnership together to create a copy of that robot with a lot of the materials that were only privileged to Bertina. And she worked with us over these years and tremendously patiently, putting together events and things that we could actually scheme a plan to bring it back to the world, because as many of you know, it was burned at the end of the picture. It was at a time when props were not valued, and we have no idea what that suit would be worth today. I mean, they'd be horrified to know that it would be one of it's basically the holy grail of film materials to ever recover today. If it ever comes up, and that's not impossible, because though it was burned, there is evidence that it may have been extinguished. People didn't keep things in those times, but this could be one of those Ark of the Covenant kind of things that happens one day. Anyway, until then, we have a copy that we've got on display outside that we worked tirelessly to make. It was about 6 years in the making, that right down to the little flecks that we spotted in some of the imagery that was there, did our best to recreate it and bring back some of Walter Schulze Mittendorff's works to the world, because until recent years, his name was merely a credit in the film, and a lot of people really didn't make those associations or get to know him. And we really wanted to make sure that these stories weren't going to be lost to history and beyond an ocean as well. So to have Bertina tell these stories and to give the inside impression, we are hoping to perform the act of a historian in protecting some of that, because some of these things are now lost forever, and now we can say with a certainty that we know some of these answers, and we're wanting to bring back this robot to the world, because at a time when technology really was nowhere, they had a premonition. I mean, this was a magical act. I mean, this aura that protected him from injury in combat saw to it that he would envision something that would be burned in the minds of every human being that knows anything about science fiction and or technology. And look at us now in the midst of technolust. I mean, this is the icon of that very happening, of the evolution of man forced by creating a tool of himself. I mean, really, I can't think of a greater act. And at that time, in his vision, the only influence he would have had to have created this image, a predecessor, would have been, in my opinion, the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb a couple of years beforehand. The first metal man face. And the influences that have come after it are numerous. I mean, I could point out any aspect of any robot that you see from here in, and you can see where it's drawn influence from it. But to have come at it with a blank slate, like Schulze Mittendorff did in his time, and just imagine this. And I think it's astounding to learn that he was not enamored with the concept of making this thing. He did not connect with it at all. He wasn't horrified, he was just more mystified as to how he would create it with the materials that they had in those days. So the limitations of the materials, coupled with a blank slate and a task that he did not want to do, resulted in this iconic figure that is now with us forever. And it's just, it's so magical. It touches a lot of us, and I meet people in our travels that are in tears to be in its company. And I think, to make that leap from the flat screen, the celluloid, and seeing these nice cleaned up versions to seeing something that's both tactile and something that they can be around, it's very important to them to make that connection. And I think by having you here in the country and as a presence, you're no longer just a voice on the phone or a name. It's just making it all that much more real. And by having something real, I think in a way we might be able to solve how to deal with this techno-lust that we have, because we're breaking it down. It's not so, it is magical because it appears on film, but we're making it a real thing and realizing that this is something that someone has created and dreamed up. And we do have to realize that we're still humans as much as we are dehumanizing ourselves with technology daily. So this is the beginning of that, and we can put a halt to it too by seeing that real people have imagined these things. And it's just amazing to see that spin that happens, when somebody's just asked to come up with something, and to see that it's perpetuated nearly 100 years later. But this film is so important. It really is a symbolism of where we're going, and it's going to be one of those movies that it's going to be 100 first. It's a feature-length science fiction film. 100 years. We are that generation in Metropolis. It was about us. We are the age of those people.
We always have the choice to choose freedom or to choose slavery. Always.
Are there, do you intend to do other reproductions of the Robert? What's going on now going forward?
It's a very good question, and it wasn't one of those things. I mean, we've done many reproductions before of other things, but this is the crown jewel of those reproductions. I mean, I can't see doing anything beyond this one that would have the significance and importance. But our objective now is to take the opportunity, because we are partnered with Bertina now, to bring this property to the people, because it is now accessible and it is an authorized and accessible thing. I mean, there are artifacts from Schulze Mittendorff's collection of works that you will be able to own soon. So it is our hopes to be able to bring some of those things to the people, and the symbology that goes with it. So the robot will travel again, and we were very concerned about affecting the property because we have control of basically a deceased movie star, and we've got to be very careful that we're not putting her out there running a vacuum cleaner and selling dirt devils and things. It's sort of a responsibility to have this thing. So I know a lot of people were horrified at the fact that perhaps Metropolis could be remade. This was not our intention, it was just about bringing it back. And we would like to see some of the behind-the-scenes aspects and to shoot segments about recreating the past on set, because there were so many interesting stories that were happening behind the camera as much as there were being captured on camera. So I think that would be a responsible way to use the robot without adding to its lore. At this point, this is what we're thinking anyway. because the fans of Metropolis they're very dedicated and they believe in it as an art form. It's not something you do a cover of, and that's where we're at with the direction of the Metropolis robot.
Sure. Well, thank you. Oh, I was just going to kill it. I see one more question. Go ahead, sir.
Can you talk a bit about how much of an influence this robot and this film has been on films in general, and especially maybe the dystopias that are so popular now? I know it's been so influential, but can you talk a bit about how it has been?
It must definitely have an influence on Star Wars. And I do not know what end. What I find is the film The Matrix, or The Matrix, is a higher evolution of Metropolis. From in my eyes, so the higher status.
It's definitely an updated version of it, for certain.
And Blade Runner maybe as well.
I think you're also forgetting we have to consider the Terminator films, which is recreation of a human form.
Everybody says this, but unfortunately I do not have seen the film, so I. But I heard this. I heard this talking that
Maybe someone will turn up with one. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. We have to really welcome Bertina and Scott. And Bertina gave all the way from Germany.